everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show for the week. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm your host, as always, on Extra, and I'm here to talk to you about an interesting game in Europe, which I think is fair to say, and an even more interesting game which is happening domestically. And the reason for that game is because I've asked one of the big guns from Heart and Hand. It is the boss himself, Mr. David Edgar, to join me. David, thank you for coming on to Extra. A rare appearance, but absolutely worthwhile nonetheless. It's great to have you.
I'd say it was a pleasure, but given what we witnessed in Eindhoven, not so much.
Yeah, this has the possibility of getting a little bit ranty. So if you just want to skip ahead for the next 10 or 15 minutes, feel free to do so. But David, all joking aside, unfortunately, let's rip the plaster off. A really disappointing night in Holland last night, as you mentioned. A 5-1 game, which I think, if I'm being perfectly honest for you, were not for Jack Butland, could have went into double figures. Obviously, we're a good number of hours after it. We've witnessed the fallout. There was obviously some immediate reaction. I don't ever enjoy seeing games like that. I hate seeing performances like that in terms of where we're at from a Rangers perspective. How are you feeling now? Have you settled down a bit, or are you still in a little bit of a kind of anger mode?
Yeah, I think it'll take a wee while to wipe it away, and I think that the fact that it's an old firm game probably means that can't wallow in it too much because we'll all be, getting the battle fever on for it. Regardless, doesn't matter the circumstances. That becomes priority regardless of where you are. But I haven't had a drink in 14 years, and it was still a sobering performance for me because I was slightly taken aback at just how poor Rangers were. And some people might say, well, we've not been great all season. There's a difference between not playing as well as you think you can and then just being inept. And there were large parts of that performance last night that were thoroughly inept. And I, I think, first and foremost, I think that I struggle to see what the formation was expected to do, what the plan was there. Then, whatever it was very badly executed. Then, basic things that in any football match you would expect: shape, organisation, people picking up runners, people not making the same mistake time after time. All of that was lacking. And then it was finished up with terrible game management, such as you get yourself back into a position to maybe put them under a bit of pressure at 2-1 when they've been absolutely coasting. And we've all seen in football matches a side that think they've got the job done switch off a bit. It can be hard for them to turn back on, but we immediately, and I do mean immediately, give away a stupid foul in a dangerous area, and then we've got a row of defenders standing watching as PSV nod in a third, and then after that, really to just compound it, the heads go completely. The heads go at 3-1, and we end up losing 5-1, as you say. Could have been worse. Conceding in the own goal, a laughable, uh, disgraceful goal that just summed up everything that went wrong on the night. It was a horrible display. There's nothing that you can take out of that without really having to grasp at straws. And I think that we've got to be honest about what we witnessed last night. It was absolutely dire, really. I think that the Rangers support, believe it or not, I think the Rangers support are in their heart. We can all get a bit angry after a big loss. I think that in our hearts we're all reasonable. Had we gone over there and lost 2-1, I think most Rangers fans would have gone, do you know what? Fair enough. PSV are a bit better than us. As disappointing as it is, right? As sore as it would be, it's the manner of the defeat. There are ways, if you have to lose, that you do. The team actually got praised, and that's why I do think that I'm being accurate when I describe the Rangers support. I think the team did get praised after the first game because we felt they went out there and they left it all on the field. They didn't do that last night. None of them can say, well, with the exception of Jack Butland, none of them can say, I don't think I could have done any better there. And that is what's disappointing. And then on top of that, as I say, I mentioned systems. I think the manager got it badly wrong. I think he then got it wrong with waiting to make substitutes too late. I think everyone from the coaching staff down has had a real horror show last night.
It feels like whenever we have a bad night, we talk about sometimes when we concede goals, right, that we talk about a series of errors, like there's a few points of failure. And I think last night, it's tough to be able to quantify who had the largest percentage of blame. People will naturally look towards the manager, naturally look towards this kind of starting lineup. I don't remember or recall any real pushback from most people in various chats and online, etc., as well, to say that Rabbi Matondo shouldn't have started. But then it moves away from, as you rightly say, a question mark around the formation and around the setup and the blueprint, which was something that Beale has tried to hang his hat on in terms of a design. He wants to be able to try and come in and do that because we knew it was missing under Van Bronckhorst. And then we move into, and I'm going to completely exclude Jack Butland from any kind of form of criticism that I'm about to lay out on the field here, because I think he was exceptional last night. Some of the saves, frankly, he had no right to make. I don't blame him whatsoever for the own goal. I think that's entirely, and I have seen people say Butland shouldn't have played it to Goldson, but I think as a centre half, you're told you never play it back to the keeper at
He
pace.
shouldn't
You
have, but
never
it
play it
still could
between
have
the
been dealt
sticks.
with.
Yeah,
Yeah, he
exactly.
shouldn't have done that, but that's still a minor error that should have been dealt
Yeah.
with anyway.
But there's too many players last night, David. I think as you saw the game unfold, where I think we were all speaking about it, where you're just like you could have just thrown a ring over a player and said he's not having a good game. Cifuentes, again has come in. He started really brightly in his career at Rangers. I thought he was terrible last night. He looked devoid of confidence. I think I'd said to you during the game, actually, he needs to be able to get the ball and calm down a little bit, ideally in a non-vulnerable area of the pitch, so that obviously if he makes a mistake, it doesn't hurt us. But he needs to be able to take care of the ball better. But then I've lifted and shifted that criticism to almost anyone else within the team. There was times where we knew that back line of PSV could be got at, and we had got some joy the previous week from it. I think I'm not saying that it was mistakes that led to it. We had to create some great chances last week to be able to score it. Obviously, look at the Dessers pass to Matondo, etc. Great finish from him. But when we were trying to hit the ball on the break, when we were looking to be able to play a ball through to an on-rushing Rabbi Matondo, every single time it felt like as if that just wasn't going to happen. Um, I think the main challenge for me in terms of how we recover from this, because this is now about recovery, I think you're right about the Rangers support. I think we can accept. It felt a lot to me like the dialogue shifted because when we had drawn PSV, we saw what they did to Sturm Graz. We knew that there was obviously history there. PSV were stoking that fire about being able to try and put us out, but we also knew what levels financially they operate in. So we knew it'd be a tough challenge. We get to the 2-2 draw in the first leg of the tie, and then it invigorates hope in us. And I still think now, after last night's abysmal performance and result, Rangers fans are, as you rightly say, willing to say, well, that's not really a level that we know that we can operate at fully. It's not a massive surprise. It's very disappointing and we could do far better. But because of, a collective performance both on and off the field in terms of what Rangers tried to produce last night, it led us to being turned over. No one wants to see it. No one likes it. I totally get it. The big shift now has to be for me, David, how he gets a response from these players going into Sunday, because I don't believe in this rah-rah and this noise around, if he loses on Sunday, his job's at risk, etc. He's not going anywhere if he loses on Sunday. Let's be completely honest. What he does need to be able to do, however, is show us that he can get a response from these players based on, that terrible night last night.
He won't get sacked if we don't win on Sunday, no, because the club have invested through him and have backed him, so that's not going to happen. But he will lose the support. There's a lot that are teetering at best on that, so he has to win. He hasn't won a big game yet domestically, and I know people will say the 3-0 at the end of the season at least got him an Old Firm victory, but it was a fairly meaningless Old Firm game if such a thing exists. He has to win. We're at home. Us being bad last night didn't make Celtic any better. They still have their issues, but nor are they, suddenly just a complete set of diddies. That's not true either. They'll be up for it as well. They'll see it as an opportunity. But all the advantage lies with us in the fact that it is at Ibrox. But I think that for his future, he has to give the Rangers fans something that we can hold on to and that we can believe in and see his progress. The issue has been so far people are struggling to see what the identity of the team is. People are struggling to see quite what the plan is. Um, I don't believe he knows what his best side is yet. I don't think that that's the case. If you look at the way the signings have come in, the one that people are understandably picking up on is we've bought a lot of strikers and yet we only seem to play one of them, which is fair enough, I think. And you mentioned there about the game and about Cifuentes. Now, Cifuentes has looked okay domestically when he's come in playing in his more natural role, which is an attack-minded box-to-box midfielder. In the PSV games, we asked him to sit and be disciplined on the right side of a defence to cover a lot of defensive stuff, and he struggled. Now, PSV's press, front to back, and a signal identity point of a Peter Bosch team is that they're excellent pressing. They do it collectively. And you could see it front to midfield to front. PSV are very, very good. So you weren't going to get time. There wasn't a non-dangerous area to have the ball in because they're on you and they'll try to get it off you quickly, and then they'll spring and they've got that lightning pace on the flanks and their big out ball and Luke de Jong. So it's a different type of test. You can't stop PSV being good at their press. What you have to be as a side is good when you have possession, brave when you have possession, which we weren't, and accurate in your passing, which we most certainly weren't. And even then, they might still. That's what I mean about you could lose a game to a side like PSV. That can happen because they're good at what they do. But we made it easy for them, and we didn't counter what they did, and we got panicked by this constant press, and that led to issues. And Cifuentes had two poor games, no getting away from it. But nobody else was taking the responsibility. One of the things that concerns me is our lack of width. I think we've mentioned that before. I think we've said the manager seems to be playing this narrow formation. And the width, he mentioned in both legs, we didn't get our fullbacks forward the way we would like to. Our fullbacks aren't the fullbacks that they were in 2020. They're older. They've got a lot more miles on the clock. Connor Goldson is the wrong side of 30. He's not the player he was 3 years ago either. He's got a lot of miles on the clock. And that's what exposed us. John Souttar, I think, will be fine domestically. But last night he looked a bit out of his depth. There's no doubt about it. He had a tough game over the two legs. And all of these are concerns. Now, there's no magic wand that will suddenly make all of these issues go away. There is a magic wand that will buy you a bit of time to work on these issues to make them go away, and it's an old firm victory. But even so, these are things that will have to be addressed when we go into the Europa League, for example, where, okay, we're not going to play Champions League sides, and God, on the basis of what we witnessed last night, that could have been very, very painful to watch. But you're still going to come up against good technical sides. You're still going to come up against sides that, if you give the ball away, have got the potential to hurt you very quickly. And that's my issue with what we're doing defensively. Defensively last night, Rangers were a shambles. Let's not split hairs about that. Rangers were an absolute shambles. I think if you look at the third goal, the real killer goal, the one that just sucked all the life and belief out of us, and as I say, our heads went immediately after it. Rangers have got a line of defenders. I think I counted 8. PSV have only got 4 players in the box. Luke de Jong gets the header, and at the back post, Saliba, who's already scored 2 headers against us, is free if he doesn't get it, because nobody's doing their job. And if you look at the goals in the second half in particular, there's a lot of Rangers players around each of them, and they're not affecting the play in the slightest. They're all ball watching, and it was a collective howler. It really was. So, what do we expect to see come Sunday? Well, you've got to be, first of all, better organised. You have to win your duels. I thought that Luke de Jong absolutely slapped Connor Goldson a bit last night. Unfortunately, I thought he had him in his pocket. He just completely disorientated him. And of course, the goals, if you like, unfortunately, very symptomatic, or very symbolic rather, of that, the own goal, because I thought De Jong bullied him last night. Um, so you're not going to come up against that level of team in Scotland, as we know. But it still doesn't mean that you shouldn't be trying to get better at obvious flaws that a good, ruthless team exposed. Yes, but there's still flaws, and even limited sides will look to work on those. If you defend the way we defended against anyone, you'll concede goals. If you defend the way we defended against a good side, you'll concede a hatful of goals, and that's exactly what we did. So there needs to be a reaction. Obviously, that goes without saying. There would need to be, no matter who we were playing. But it's a big match. It's a strange Old Firm match, and I don't think I can remember a time where two Old Firm managers went into the match under so much pressure. Certainly not recently, anyway, because both managers, I think, have got a lot to prove to their respective fan bases at the moment. So it's going to be strange in that sense. And it's a match really that neither of them can afford to lose. But from our point of view, we've got to do better in key areas. We've got to try and figure out, I think, a way of playing that fits in the players that we've brought in. Because what we witnessed last night, as I say, you take those errors, you take those flaws, even against limited sides, they'll exploit it on occasion, and against good sides, they'll really punish you, and that's what we saw, and it was brutal what we witnessed.
There's elements to that. Yeah, listen, I agree with all of that, and I think that there's obviously a lot to unpack there in terms of the shifting narrative around where we know that we can be to a certain extent outclassed, but when we contribute towards our own downfall, again, like I say, I think it leads into the frustrations that we're all feeling. There's got to be an element of that, however, where as much as I believe that the manager can reflect on what he's done, the squad have to be able to look at that. And what I think Sunday presents us with, because I do want to remain positive with it. I know that you can be a bit doom and gloom and listen. Last night I wasn't in the mood for talking to anyone, but now looking at it in a little bit more the kind of the light of day and looking towards Sunday in terms of what it can mean for them. It, I think the reason as to why there is so much importance placed on it for both managers is I think it recovers a Celtic fan base which right now has got a lot of questions that it's asking this early on in the season, and for us, it's asking a question around the manager's had investment. There's some questions around the fact that he's for whatever reason the certain players not starting. I'm not gonna necessarily focus too much in the front line because I do think Rabbi Matondo, David, has played his way into that starting lineup. Right, I think that's totally fair. But I think there's questions around, do you start Danilo? Do you look at starting Sima Dessers, Lammers, rather than probably just seeing a repetition of what we've seen at the moment just now, where it's almost Dessers right from the get off. And Danilo's coming on as a sub at some stage. And again, like I say, we've provided the manager with that context. But even aside from his selections and from his signings, because I don't think we expect much more business to happen before the window closes tomorrow. The most important thing he has to do now is be able to try and look for leaders within that
Well,
squad to recover that team.
yeah, the forwards thing is odd because he spent the guts of his spend on three players, Lammers, Danilo, and Dessers, and it's only really Dessers who's featuring at the moment. The others coming off the bench. I can't imagine that was the case. I can't imagine he spent a big chunk of his budget to sit two players on the bench constantly out the three of them. So that's a strange one. In terms then of the other areas, the leaders, yeah, I mean those are all things that you need, and they may emerge through time, but it's something you need quite quickly. I just think that the team got absolutely torn apart at an early stage. There are issues in terms of selections at the moment, such as Cantwell seems to be playing a different place every game. Um, where I think it's quite clear where he's most important to us. So, at the weekend, for example, I would go with, if you like, almost a more traditional 4-3-3. I'd go with Matondo on the left and Sima on the right and use their pace. and go with a midfield of Jack Raskin and Cantwell, because I think then that shows you that's a system that I understand, and maybe that's me just as a fan saying, well, I get that, that makes sense to me, but that's not what he's been attempting. He's been attempting this narrow formation, a diamond quite often, somebody playing off the striker, and it hasn't really worked so far, to any great extent. Bits within games, I suppose, if I'm being unfair. Um, and I just think that at the moment we're trying a lot of stuff, and that concerns me because surely these guys were brought in with a plan as to where they were going to play. And not all of them were signed as starters, I get that. But you would think that the ones the money was spent on, the forwards in particular, were bought with a plan and to play together. And bar the opening day at Kilmarnock, I think we haven't really seen. I don't think Lammers has started. So it's there's a lot of questions, and they're not going to go away if we beat Celtic. It's just everybody will be a bit calmer in terms of, right, let's see what happens from here on in. It's a massive game. I don't think you can overestimate just quite how important it is to Michael Beale personally, because he needs. I mean, it's important to all of us, obviously, but I mean in terms of his career at Rangers, it's huge. If he loses this game, then belief in him is going to be gone for the vast majority of Rangers supporters. That's just a fact, because he'll have lost every single big challenge that's come his way. And I do think that players can start slowly or go through dips in forms and come back. I think once a crowd gives up on a manager, it's very difficult. And there's the other incentive. If we were to beat Celtic at the weekend, a lot of their support will give up on their manager. So there's an incentive for you straight away. You can really apply pressure there. Something we haven't been able to do enough in the past 2 seasons, of applying pressure at the right times to Celtic and letting them get comfortable, and then be able to relax. And we know how it's ended up. So yeah, I do expect a reaction from them. I think that's the least the supporters we can expect. Um, I don't know why Ryan Jack didn't start last night, unless it was with a view to Sunday. That's the only thing I can think of. Similarly, Raskan coming off, I could only assume was right. Well, we're starting to think about Sunday, because Cifuentes was, as you say, having a bit of a mare. Uh, it does come down to, there is really just one thing to do now, and that's win Sunday. And it won't change some of the things that I've mentioned there, as I say, such as defensive organisation, such as perhaps aging players in key positions, the conundrum about who plays where, all of that. But it will buy them a bit of time and 2 weeks in the training ground to try and resolve some of it, because I think that fans can potentially accept that, well, we're trying a lot of new things and we've brought in, and we ran into a good team, just as we're trying to figure it out, but they won't domestically, because we should have had something figured out by now domestically. I keep going back to it, but it's true. We're at home. We've got 50,000 Rangers fans in that stadium. It's not the Celtic of last season that were flying and full of confidence. You have to win it. You've got no other option. You have to win it. And then, strangely enough, as I say, you'll be getting Celtic fans saying exactly the same thing about their side, that they've got to go and get a result in this particular match, because Rangers have just been cuffed and there's pressure on their manager. It's a strange old firm in that regard.
Yeah, and I think it kind of moves, because if you look a little bit kind of further afield in terms of what happens if we were to win that game, I think that there still has to be a lot of work done. I still think that the manager does have to be able to solidify answers to some of the questions that he's been asked, which again can only really be done with results. And I think that last night was difficult because of the manner of the defeat in terms of how we performed. I think we can accept it, but when you have an Old Firm game that's round the corner, and what I think is a Celtic team that has certainly wobbled, and I'm not downplaying, I think you said it earlier on, we're not saying, for example, this is a poor Celtic team. I don't believe that whilst they've had changes, all of a sudden that they've went from great to dirge overnight. I don't believe that happens, but I think it also creates its own pressure onto the team if we get a win against them. Because you're right, their fans will turn against them like we would with the manager if Michael Beale loses on Sunday as well. So it will swing in a particular direction. I think if Michael Beale wins, and then you probably see the ripple effect of the next stone coming into the pond of beating Livingston in the League Cup, progressing through that stage, then I think that being able to try and settle everybody down, that's the benefit that we've seen Celtic, get previously, where they've been able to win a cup early doors, and it just puts it on the scoreboard. And I think that that's something that we can certainly look at. I think if he also fails to do that, then I think people will absolutely be clamouring for change, but we just have to be able to address that when we kind of come to it. In terms of the transfer window closing, David, obviously on our Patreon site we've got some great content regarding the transfer shows. The boys are doing a live broadcast in the next, I think it's is it tomorrow night that they're doing it?
Friday night, yeah,
Friday night,
closes.
in terms of the window. So make sure that you don't miss that, folks, in terms of just catching up with it. David, is there any other signings that you'd like to be able, or any other positions that you feel that we should be addressing in terms of incoming players?
We need a centre back. Now, from what the manager said after the match, it doesn't look as though one's going to come in. And partially that's because we haven't been able to shift Ben Davis. But it is leaving us short in that area, I think. And it could be something that we end up regretting. I think we should try and move and get someone in for that position. But at the moment, at the time of recording, we can only go on what has been publicly said, and that's they don't expect any incomings. At the end of the day, he was backed. He got the players he wanted. He needs to produce better than what we witnessed last night. And yeah, look, I'm realistic. I think as a fan, I go back to, as you said, if we beat Celtic, that could kickstart us and push us on a wee bit. You're not going to run into a PSV domestically. That's also a fact. But you have to do better in terms of your levels all across the pitch, and the coach has to do better in terms of getting those levels up right across the pitch. You mentioned the League Cup there. I think for a lot of fans, rather understandably, that's become non-negotiable. I think we have to win it, and we do. We haven't won it for far too long. We've got a home tie in the quarters, and then you're off to Hampden with the biggest impediment to us winning this trophy no longer in it. You have to win it, and we can't though, unfortunately, because we haven't been winning enough to
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 be
go. Oh,
nonchalant about it.
yeah, we'll definitely win that. We haven't proved that that's the case. So there are short-term goals, if you like, but you know, right now, as we record this, pretty much everything comes down to Sunday. It will be a pivotal game in the season. You won't win or lose the league on Sunday. I absolutely understand that, but the effect that it could have within the season on either side is enormous. It's absolutely huge, and I don't think that we should downplay that. Whoever loses, I'm sure, will be coming out afterwards and saying, well, it's only September the 1st, or
Yeah, there's lots of football
September
still
the
to be
3rd,
played.
rather. Yeah, and they're technically right, but it's the mentality that it can create, it's the boost that it can give, it's the damage it can do. All of those are huge factors in this match. So at the moment, it's difficult to look beyond Sunday because the picture, I think, radically changes one way or the other depending on the result on Sunday.
And you've got the added bonus of going straight into an international break immediately thereafter. So it festers, I think, in terms of whatever result comes out with that, because, you sit and you're waiting on it, and then you're waiting on the domestic football being able to try and come back, which, again, when you're in that international break, it always feels like as if it's a lifetime before it comes into it. So yeah, listen, I think we've covered that really fairly. I think, as I say, we have to move beyond the disappointment of last night, because we've talked a little bit around the team being able to try and recover within that, something which I think that Steven Gerrard was excellent at being able to do. You think about back to 2019 and losing the League Cup final due to an offside goal. We came back and then obviously won at Parkhead, and now those same players, because there's still plenty of them within that squad, need to be able to ensure they can see that recovery of it. And then for our new signings making their Old Firm debut, I think the most important thing, David, is if they are involved, we just need to ensure that they don't get overawed by the occasion. That's really, really important. And I expect, and again, I never want to sound entitled as a Rangers fan, but I do expect that the guys who have played in these games before are absolutely guiding those that haven't through it, supporting them, making sure that, like I say, we absolutely get the best out of them, because we can't see them just, caught like a rabbit in the headlights, which has happened in the past.
It has, but it shouldn't in this particular game because of the way that the crowd are set up for our players anyway, because there are 50,000. And let's not kid ourselves here. Yes, the atmosphere, had it been St Mirren at home on Sunday, would probably have been fairly low after Wednesday night. That won't be the case. And they'll get nothing but non-stop backing. It should lift you. And yeah, the game will be 100 miles an hour here and scaring. We know that, but it won't be the same as if it was at Parkhead, or even if they had, the Broomlin. The games are slightly different now with the way that the tickets are dispersed. So there is no excuse on Sunday not to go out there and get the result. There really isn't. You've got to go out there. You've got to play a lot better than you did the other night. You've got to be braver than you were the other night, uh, and you've got to be deadly focused, I think, on making it up to the Rangers support after what was an embarrassing performance and result in Eindhoven. So the the incentive for our players is quite clear. First of all, those all the stuff we've talked about in terms of trying to get to a position where we're going to be able to win a league title. That's obviously huge. 3 points against your biggest rivals is obviously huge. But you should also be viewing it as a fantastic opportunity to almost escape deserved criticism for that shit show in Holland. That if you win, such is the reality of, and I'm sure there'll be listeners going, well, it won't change anything for me. But the reality is, for the vast majority of fans, if Rangers win on Sunday, then it will buy them a lot of space, a lot of room to kind of develop and grow and just breathe, if you like, for a couple of weeks, as you mentioned. There, it's the international week again. If you lose, then the criticism that comes down will be savage and continual. So they should be looking at it as an opportunity to go, we've been given this chance to almost, put that one away, put that result performance to bed. They have to take it. There's just no other option.
Yep, totally agree. Totally agree. Interesting point, and the last thing I want to cover on this, David, because again, like I say, we haven't yet had the presser yet, was around potential options if we have to use them at left back. Borna Barisic obviously went off just after half time last night. Looked like a calf strain. However, he did look fairly mobile when he was going off. We haven't had any real news regarding the extent of the injury and what that could theoretically mean. But if it's the case that we're told that he can't feature, do we look towards Dijon Sterling again? Did he do enough for you last night, do you think, at the moment
Ah,
to...
he had a tough time. Let's be
Yeah,
honest. When he came on here, the Rangers conceded a lot of goals after he came on down his side. Wasn't alone in that, incidentally, but he had a tough game. Look, if he has to play, then it's because there is nobody else. The only options, I think, would be him or Davis to play in there. Davis naturally isn't a fullback, and it would change the way that we had to line up. So hopefully Barisic is fit to play in the match. If not, Sterling will have to play. But it doesn't matter who's playing on Sunday. It really doesn't. The attitude has to be the same, and the performance level has to be the same. Go back to something that we said right at the start of the show. You need to leave everything out there in certain matches. Rangers didn't do that in Eindhoven. They absolutely have to do that on Sunday.
for sure. For sure. So yeah, it will be interesting, and I think as hate to use the cliche of the game will take care of itself, but I think it will for all the factors that I think that we've discussed. As I say, post Old Firm game, we do go straight into an international break. However, your access to some great Rangers content does not need to stop. You can head on over to our Patreon site, patreon.com/heart and hand, and you can hear some absolutely brilliant updates, not only from the Old Firm weekend, but the build up to it. And again, as I say, delve into some archive content as well to be able to keep you fulfilled with all of your Rangers fixes, plus obviously our daily updates in terms of what's happening with the club as well. Thank you to our executive producers in London, Mr. Mike Lee and Mr. Paul Myers. Thank you to our sponsor, Zenith Coins. Please head on over to zenithcoins.com to see some fantastic memorabilia across there. And most importantly, thank you to my guest, Mr. David Edgar. David, we will get the battle fever on pretty shortly. I'm fairly sure people, probably from this afternoon into tomorrow are going to start getting into the YouTube reels, all of that kind of stuff. I know I will be. As much as we say we love them and loathe them, Old Firm weekends are just always something special.
Yeah, especially this is all set up for us, and that's the way I'm viewing it. Go and win, go and do it. It's not an against the odds or anything like that. It's the game is there to be won. Rangers should win it, in my opinion. It's down to the players. They need to turn up. They need to deliver a performance, and they need to deliver 3 points. The ball is very much in their court on it. If they do that, if they turn up and if they right the wrongs, if they're all determined of I didn't represent the real me at the weekend, I'm going to do it in midweek, I'm going to do it at the weekend, then we've got every single chance of picking up the result we need. And make no mistake, we do need it. So I am expecting a much better performance from Rangers. I think as a fan, I think we all have the right to expect a much better performance from them. They let themselves and therefore us down on Wednesday. This is a golden opportunity to make it up, and it's one that they've got to take.
Relish it. Relish the opportunity. I totally agree. Thank you, folks. We'll be back with you on Flagship on Monday, unpacking all of the Old Firm game. As I say, we'll have a bit of a break across the Old Firm weekend for our Flagship and extra shows, but you can head on over to our Patreon site, join a fantastic growing community to be able to talk about all things Rangers. Until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.